The romanticism of an apocalypse is something I'm seeing more and more as of late. People posting on TikTok or Instagram talking about how they would actually want an apocalypse to happen. But it's strange, I don't see these comments or posts about 28 Days Later or World War Z. They are normally centered around The Last of Us, which is just mental, or more commonly, The Walking Dead. And although it sounds absolute ludicrous to wish upon essentially the end of humanity and civilization as we know it, I'd be lying if the thought had never crossed my mind. So, in today's video, I wanted to discuss why I think more and more people are expressing their desires for an apocalypse to happen, and what the consequences of this event would really be. I think the majority of the romanticism centered around The Walking Dead is how the world is portrayed within the show. The series is harrowing and gut-wrenching, but there are also glimpses of light and beauty within it. Take how the show is shot, especially in the early seasons. The cinematography you're seeing now feels warm and inviting, and it's quite frankly a work of art. The show manages to demonstrate just how beautiful the world really is, even if it is overrun by flesh-eating monsters. Let's take Herschel's farm for example. Tell me, with the crickets chirping and the sun scorching down as Rick and Herschel look upon the rolling hills of Georgia, that part of you doesn't want to be there. Escape out of all the chaos and stress within your life and strip back to a more basic form of living. There would be no bills or financial worries, just you and the deep-rooted desire that lies within all of us, and that is to survive. I think there's something really appealing in that concept to many. It's an escape from our monotonous and boring lives, but people forget that this would come at a grave cost. Because quite frankly, this would be the reality of a zombie apocalypse. Over 99% of the population is wiped out in The Walking Dead, and if you think that you and everyone you love would be in that less than 1%, then you are either deluded or have some serious plot armor. And I think the reason no one romanticizes 28 Days Later or Train to Busan or most other zombie media is because they portray the apocalypse to be dull, depressing, and quite frankly not worth living in. The zombies in these fictional stories are terrifying, and no sane person wishes to even be put in the same universe as some of these creatures. But The Walking Dead zombies are slow and lethargic, after season 1 that is, and you can see yourself being able to survive in this environment. The world is full of life, and there is such an emphasis on nature and the resilience of the human spirit that although there is immense loss in this show, it almost lulls you into this false sense of comfort. And that's what makes The Walking Dead so unique. Yes, it's a story filled with death and tragedy, but ultimately there's always hope and something for our characters to fight for. I think for many, the sense of living in a totally free world where they must rely entirely on their instincts and creativity to survive, and social norms, class and wealth all go out the window, appeals to people in a very strange way. It would be liberating and strip you back to the bare basics. You wouldn't have to go to work or go to school or do things you didn't really want to do. You'd kind of just have to wake up and survive. In reality, we only get a very short time on this spinning planet, and lots of us spend it doing stuff that in the grand scheme of things we wouldn't choose to do unless we were forced. And that's exactly why people romanticize the apocalypse from The Walking Dead. Along with this, the show's emphasis on communities and relationships, despite the chaos unfolding around them, we see our characters form tight-knit families and meaningful connections. Daryl and Rick, Maggie and Glenn, and Michonne and Carl are all perfect examples. Whether it's romantic or completely platonic, it's just heartwarming to see, and it's this emotional depth that attracts viewers to want to be a part of this fictional world. Now, I'd like to talk about my own personal experience for a minute now. Just over a year ago, I would wake up at 5 AM most mornings to either do the 3-hour commute to my university or to work the morning shift at my job. And quite frankly, I hated it. It was around this time I decided to watch Fear the Walking Dead for the first time. And it's in this show we meet the character of Nick Clark. He was a similar age to me and someone I felt myself relating to in terms of their views on the world. And as I started to get increasingly burnt out from my own reality, I found myself escaping to this scenario over and over again in my head, where I'd ask myself, if the apocalypse really did happen, would it be that bad? Now, the answer to that question is most definitely yes, it would be awful. But to me, in that time frame and in that mindset, as someone who was frustrated with the way their life was going, the concept of an escape was incredibly appealing to me. That's why, to this day, Nick Clark is my all-time favourite character in all of fiction, and I understand he's not the best by the textbook, but he's my absolute favourite, and he's a big reason I even started this YouTube channel. So my point here is I understand the viewpoint of a simpler life because I've thought about it myself, and the world of The Walking Dead offers this alternate reality that people can start to romanticise. I mean, even from most animals' perspectives, an apocalypse that killed off most humans would be brilliant. Fumes, wastage, deforestation, war, global warming, it would all come to a grinding halt. And in our absence, the world would start to heal and recover from the numerous scars we've inflicted on it. Just take the global pandemic from 2020 for example. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say its official name without getting restricted, but the planet saw a drastic decrease in air pollution and greenhouse gases emissions in just a few short weeks. Also, the way as a race we dealt with that problem should prove to everybody that if something like a zombie apocalypse was to happen in real life, we would all be screwed. But my point is, from anything that wasn't a human and maybe some other slower moving land mammals that might also become walker lunch, the end of humanity probably wouldn't be that bad. As much as it pains me as a living human being to say that. Now, obviously, like previously stated, if you were lucky enough to be in the less than 1 percentile to survive, pretty much everybody you've ever loved would die, and the trauma that would cause would be unfathomable. Most of the survivors would be wandering around as emotional unstable wrecks, who would probably show symptoms of PTSD. I mean, let's just take Rick Grimes for example. He lost his wife, his son, was forced to kill his best friend, and watched the deaths of hundreds of people he was close to and loved. And although the show does briefly touch upon his emotional state, in reality the average person is not mentally capable of seeing all of that and remaining sane. In fact, most of us would probably resemble Clara from season 4 episode 1, the crazy Irish woman in the woods, rather than a character like Daryl or Rick. But even if you were able to cope with the sheer amount of trauma the apocalypse would provide, it's the people that would thrive in this lawless environment that would be terrifying. I mean, in the show, we see antagonists like the Governor, Simon, or even Alpha, all of whom had done heinous crimes with no repercussions in the now lawless world. But in reality, you wouldn't be living in a TV show, meaning the good guys wouldn't always win. In fact, it's the bad guys that would probably have the advantage in this type of world. It's really sad and also quite scary to think about how people would behave in this type of environment. The people such as the Governor, who is arguably the worst villain in the entire show, would probably be commonplace in the apocalypse. So yes, you might be able to deal with the slow and lethargic walkers, but the hostile groups and the trauma of losing everybody you loved would suddenly make you wish you could go back to waking up in a nice warm bed, even if it was at 5 AM. Having food in the fridge and family and friends surrounding you. And I think ultimately it comes down to the grass is always greener. It's human instinct to desire what we don't have. We tend to focus way more on the negatives rather than the positives. So yes, life might seem monotonous and boring, but I promise you it would be better than living in the world I've just described. So to all the comments that say, yeah, I'd easily survive The Walking Dead and I'd love to live in the apocalypse, I highly doubt that you actually would. I mean, main character syndrome runs rampant in many people, so yes, you might full-heartedly believe I'm different, I'd survive, and I'd be fine with the trauma, but you probably wouldn't. I mean, do you think the people with PTSD who went into war were thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to be emotionally scarred for the rest of my life? Of course not. But it just sometimes happens, and there's nothing you can do about it. And no, it doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. So yeah, you might become gradually desensitized to it all, eventually, but I really don't think it would be the beautiful, picturesque escape from reality that some people might assume. So yeah, I get it, the apocalypse can look appealing, especially in the instance of the one we see portrayed in The Walking Dead. Whether it's because you want to escape from your life, strip back to basics, or feel the sense of community amongst the survivors of the show. Or even going a step further, maybe you'd find it easier to comprehend walkers as they are not sly or deceiving. You know what they want, unlike other people who can often be complicated with unique and selfish motivations. Everybody has their reasons. And hell, I'm not, and neither is anybody else qualified to tell you how you'd fare in the apocalypse. You might get lucky, find a good group, rebuild a small community, and live happily ever after. Because who truly knows? But in my opinion, no matter how appealing the apocalypse in The Walking Dead may feel to an individual, it's all a mirage. And if it happened in real life, not only would it be utterly devastating as billions of people would die, I also think it would be a world away from what we see in the show. Realistically, The Walking Dead couldn't just be 11 seasons of people being sad, crying and having visions, because it's far too depressing to make good television. But that's ultimately what it would probably be like in reality. But hey, that's just my opinion, so please do let me know down below in the comments what you think about this topic, as I've been seeing more and more of it as of late. And like I stated earlier, I'd be lying if I didn't say I'd thought about it as well. But thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, please do like and subscribe, as we are closing in on 10,000 subscribers, and the support I've been receiving recently has just been unreal, so thank you all again. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.